guys, welcome to PsychSpace, and today we're going to look at the effect of situational factors on behaviours. And as you can see by the spec on the screen, it's the first theory of social influence that you're going to come across. Now, if you need any other help with GCSE Psychology, do take a look at the channel, otherwise we're going to get straight into the video. Quick disclaimer, I might not be able to go through every single key term in this video, and that's because a lot of them are mentioned in the key concepts. We're doing a full in-depth video on this on the channel, so do keep an eye out. Now, the definition of a situational factor is simply anything that's external or from your environment that affects your behaviour. So as long as it is something from your environment and it affects your behaviour, it's a situational factor. Examples include people around you, authority figures, or things like uniform. Now, for your course, there are 4 situational factors you must know. And before we get into these 4 situational factors, please make sure you take this top tip away. Do not get them confused with dispositional factors. Dispositional factors are internal things. Situational factors are external things. There are 4 of each, which can make them really confusing, but please make sure you spend a lot of time in your revision categorizing them and getting them the right way around. It's really important to save you marks in that exam. So the first situational factor for us to go over is the effect of majority influence on conformity. And this simply means that when you're the minority or when you feel outnumbered, you're more likely just to go along with everyone else in order for you to fit in and not be the odd one out. For example, if it's takeaway night and your friends all want a pepperoni pizza, you might struggle to go against them and say, I want a Hawaiian. Instead, you'll probably just end up having a pepperoni pizza with them. This is because there's more of them than there is of you and you want to fit in. It's important to note that the size of the group matters. So the more people that are trying to get you to do something, the more likely you're going to copy along. And that is how the majority can have an influence on your conformity levels. Now, the next situational factor we're going to talk about is the effects of collective and crowd behaviours. This is how people change their behaviours just because they're in a crowd or in a collective environment. Now, for this, the most important thing you need to know is that de-individuation tends to happen. The word de-individuation simply means that people lose their sense of identity. So you'll do things that maybe you normally wouldn't do. A great example of this is either at a party where a lot of people do some crazy things that maybe they shouldn't do, or another great example is at a football game. We always hear people shouting things that, well, aren't very nice and they really shouldn't shout. But ordinarily, if they weren't in a crowd, they would never say those things to a referee. This is an example of de-individuation as a result of a crowd environment, and this is the effect of crowds on behaviour. Thirdly, we have the effects of culture on pro-social and anti-social behaviour. So we can see some key terms there that we're going to need to use. Firstly, we need to understand that some cultures are more collectivist in their approach. These are cultures like China and Japan. They are members of their community. They really think about others, their friends, their families, their neighbours in their decision making. Whereas some cultures are more individualistic, and this tends to be places like the UK. Now, please don't stress too much about learning a lot about individualistic and collectivist cultures. All you need to know for your exam is that collectivist cultures lead to more pro-social behaviour. That's more positive behaviour for their environment, things like helping an old lady cross the road or volunteering at a homeless shelter. On the other hand, individualistic cultures are much more likely to demonstrate antisocial behaviour. Examples of these include things like graffitiing, trespassing, and basically anything that goes against society. And finally, we come on to the effect of authority figures on obedience. And the most important thing you need to learn here is pretty straightforward. It's just the idea that the more authority someone has, the more likely people will obey them. Now, by authority, I mean power. I mean the ability to be able to punish someone. So, for example, although you're probably going to listen to your teacher, if a head teacher tells you to do something, you're probably going to listen even more because you know a head teacher has more power. There's more consequences to not listening to them. So, when an authority figure tells you to do something, you do it. And this can sometimes be known as being in an agentic state. This is simply where you're in a position where you're going to listen to anything that authority figure says. Finally, as with every study and theory that we look at, there is a main criticism we need to know. And the main one here is that the theory of situational factors is way too deterministic. It suggests that people are only in control of their actions because of people around them, and they don't have the choice to be able to say, no, I don't want to listen to you. In reality, that might not be the case, and therefore the theory of situational factors is too deterministic. And finally, we come on to the real examples of some exam questions in the exam zone. Please pause the video and give this a real go before I put the answers on the screen. Now, and as you can see, a really important top tip for you to remember is the fact that nowhere on this screen does it say situational factors, and it's actually really rare that they refer to anything to do with situational factors. They usually just ask you about the factor itself, so you're going to have to put 2 and 2 together and spot what the question's asking you about. And that's it for situational factors. Now, if it helped, then please consider liking, subscribing, and checking out the other videos. Otherwise, best of luck in your exams.